Okay, in this session we're going to talk about how you can define a custom MIB collection in IMC. So first part of the process is you would normally load the MIB files for the data you want to collect. You don't have to do that. If you know the OID numbers you can configure them manually, but it is probably easier if you load the MIB files into IMC. And then the next thing we need to work out is what data we want to report on. So just before we do that, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on how SNMP MIB tables work. So with SNMP we've got different types of entities. Okay, we've got what we call branches. Branches then have, at the very end of them, they have what we call a leaf node. So a leaf node is something that's as far as it goes. So if we look here, for example, we've got a branch called IF table, or a branch called interfaces, and then when we expand out the branch, we've got IF table, and then we go into IF table, we've then got IF entry, and IF entry is defined as a table. Now in the ASN language, or BR language, a table, it tells you here, so that it's a sequence, so we refer to them as sequences. And the table is defined as being a sequence of IF index, which is that one there. It's then got a thing called IF description, which is that one there. Then we've got a thing called IF MTU, IF type, etc. Now, the way the ASN language works, it's all based on what we call type length value, or BER is based on type length value. So looking at this, we define an attribute and then we define what data type it is. So we can see here, for example, that IF index is an integer data type, IF description is an octet string, IF type is an integer, and so on. Now, this becomes relevant when we set up the collection in IMC. IF index has a data type which is universal 2. So 2 is an integer, 4 is an octet string, yeah. And then we've got other data types in it. We've got things like counters. So if we click on, for example, IF out octets, then we can see that IF out octets is an integer that can have a value within that range there. With tables, we have an index. So if you imagine a table, you've got column headings, which are the individual attributes, but then each of the data points is a row within that table. So if I want to create a report, or I want to collect some data for a specific interface on this device, then what I need to work out, I need to work with two values. I need to work with one called IF description, which is that one there, and I also want to, for argument's sake, bring back the number of octets on the interface, which is that attribute there. But if I only want to collect that for specific interfaces, then what I need to do is work it out. So I click on the IF description and I click get all. So what I've got here is, looking at this table, and the majority of most of the tables we work with are of this format. Normally the first entry will be an index value, and that's normally going to be an integer, and that identifies each individual row. So think of it like the row number. So if we look at IF description, the OID number for IF description is 136.121.2212. But if I look at the values that come back, you can see we've got 136.121.22.121, 22, 23, 24, 25. So this last part of the OID number is what we call the index part of it. So I can see that IF description, if I want to bring back metrics for the fast Ethernet interface, in this particular device that I've connected to, I can see that IF index 1, so in row 1 of this table, refers to an interface called fast Ethernet 00. Okay, and this is going to become important when we look at configuring this in IMC. So that's the description. The other value I want to bring back is the octet string. And the octet string, if I just do it clear, get all, so that brings back some figures. So what I need to do is I want to only bring back or work out which of these figures relate to FA0. It's quite easy to do because I can just marry up the index number. So I can see that 16.1, which was index 1, has got that value. And just to remind ourselves, if we go back to IF description, get all, then we can see that index 1 relates to fast Ethernet. So what I want to do is I want to get IMC to collect this information. And I'm going to do two things. I'm going to tell it what value to bring back, or what formula to work out the value, but then I'm also going to tell it what label to use. So depending on the MIB tables you look at, the label that you may want to pick is different. In the case of interface type stats, the one we normally go for would be IF description. So the important thing is these are the two OID numbers that I want to work with. Okay. The other important thing here is that this particular table has got pretty standard indexing structure in that the index for each row is a single integer value. More complex data tables may have a multi-index one, so they may have a number of the number of attributes which make up the index. So you will find that with more complex things. For example, if you're working with MPLS MIBs, you'll find that they normally have a 2 or 3 index element. But most of the standard stuff that you may want to bring back will probably just have one, as in the case here. So, what do I do with all this information? Right. I can use the MIB browser in IMC to do this, but I'm going to work with this one just because it's it probably shows it a little clearer as to what's going on. So I'm going to go into IMC and I want to create this as a collection. I want to collect this data. So I have to set it up as a custom index. So to do that, which we will do in the second part of this video,